Hi, this is Robert with Cruzbike, and today we are going to assemble a T50 frame. This is the new 2022 T50. As always, we recommend a reputable bike shop assemble your frame and your bike, but this video will go over everything you need to assemble your frame. Everything you need for a complete frame set is included with your T50 frame set. And we have several improvements to this version. Similar to the last version, we have our rear seat struts included, all assembled and ready to go. We have a nice set of handlebars that can face either direction when you do the install, including a stem and the riser. Our frame we have a new seat rail, so the seat adjusts forward and backward much easier than before. Note we also have a nice new 60mm tube, and here we have a nice pre-installed tube that'll help you be able to install a cable and housing. So you want to make sure you do not remove this until you're ready to insert your cable through the tube, and then you remove the tube and then insert the housing over the cable. Your bike shop should be able to do that pretty easily. We also have our front end here. Everything is pre-assembled and ready to go. Derailleur hanger pre-installed there. Our headset and our bearing, everything is in order here. We'll go over that again later as well. Proper order of the headset. And we also have our new resin seat with all of the brackets installed and ready to go. With the new resin seat, it's highly recommended you always use the pad to help spread the forces out over the base of the seat much more evenly. We'll go over some assembly tips of the seat when we get there, and also have included the Velcro and your Cruzbike seat pad. Alright, let's assemble our T50 frame set. Cleared everything away, and we're starting with just our bare frame. First thing we're going to do is install our front triangle. Here we have everything a little bit opened up and ready to go. First thing we want to do is make sure that we remove the top clamp from the steer tube, and also take off all of our upper bearing pieces that we need. We're also going to want to pre-grease our headset cups in the frame itself. Make sure everything is nice and lubricated there. Alright, so the first thing, we're going to use our 5mm Allen to undo the clamp and remove it, and also the spacer, and the other elements come off as well, including the top cap and the seal and all of the bearing spacers. So the only thing we should have on the fork at this time is the lower bearing. So with the lower bearing on and the cups greased, we will insert the frame right over the top of the steer tube. Make sure the bearing is nice and seated inside the bearing race on the lower headset cup. Once we have that all nice and set, we're going to install our top bearing. Note, it goes one direction. You want to make sure it goes the way shown in the video here. And once we have that on, the order these go in is the dust shield, the upper cone with the cones facing down into the bearing. Make sure everything is nice and seated. Now we're going to have our spacer. This is the piece that's going to insert down into the bearing and kind of create the tension. Then we have our top cap. We're going to slide that on, make sure everything is nice and snug. Now we have a blank spacer included in the frame set, but we're also including a adjusting spacer. This is going to make adjusting the headset tension much easier using a standard set of headset wrenches. So you want to loosen this up, make sure everything is adjusted all the way in so it's as thin as possible, and then we're going to use the adjustable headset spacer in place of the standard headset spacer. So we'll put that on, and then we will put our top clamp on top of the adjusting spacer. This is basically the exact same setup that we had on the previous T50s and other versions of the QX100, etc., with an adjusting headset spacer. We're going to pre-tension everything as much as we can by hand, and then we will use our Allen to tighten that top clamp. Then once you've done that, you can use a set of headset wrenches to gently expand the adjusting spacer to set the headset tension, and then use the small set screw on the spacer to tighten it down so it doesn't loosen. Alright, once we have that done, we can loosen up our pivot clamp and our boom clamp right here, and we can adjust it in and out. And we're going to want to make sure when we put this boom clamp and pivot clamp unit over the fork that we have it with the angled side facing down, so the bracket is at the top. So we're going to flip it over. In this case, yours might not be that way, and we're going to insert it down over the fork. Note we have a nice amount of steer tube exposed, and once we have that, we're going to take our riser tube with the slot facing the rear, because we want the clamp to clamp around the slot on the riser tube. With the slot towards the back, we're going to slide it down and inside the pivot clamp all the way down, and while putting pressure down, we will tighten the pivot clamp bolts. Alright, let's install our steering stem. Now when we install the steer stem, the factory option is a nice short stem and handlebar setup. You can customize the length of your stem by just getting different stems. Here we have the handlebar side and the riser side. So the first thing we need to do is we need to pull this top cap off from the star nut. So we'll use our 5mm Allen, pull off the top cap, and that will allow us to slide our stem right on top of the riser, and then we can reinstall our top cap and tighten the 4mm Allens that hold the stem to the riser. As you can see in our installation here, the handlebar is high and the stem can be lowered to a correct position once your bike is complete and you do a complete fitting. The star nut can be inserted further into the riser tube, and then the riser tube can be cut appropriately, or you can simply cut the riser tube and install a new star nut, or some people just feel free to leave the riser tube a longer length. It's okay if you have a little bit sticking out of the top. So that handlebar adjustment can go up and down, in addition to a longer stem being used for more handlebar reach. All right, now that we have our stem on, we can move on to the back of the bike, take a break from the front. We want to loosen our rear seat tubes so we can adjust them up and down. I'm going to tighten them just a little bit so they can still move and turn, so we want them in the right position. We're going to remove our bolts off the back of the frame, and then we're simply going to bolt the seat struts right to those same holes using the provided bolts. Now we're going to move on to the seat and the handlebars. It's a little easier to do this with the bike in the more upright position, but in order to have the bike stand a little bit easier, I'm going to remove the derailleur hanger. This is a piece we don't want to damage, so I'm just going to take it off temporarily. You don't necessarily have to take this off. I'm just taking it off in order to make the video a little easier to shoot with the bike sitting up. And now if you're going to do this, make sure you're very careful with the seat struts. You don't want them to come crashing down onto your paint job. Make sure you either provide some padding there or just be very careful. Now here we have our seat, which is fully assembled, and we have our mounting struts. we're going to very carefully set back the seat struts, or you can also remove the top heavy portion or pad it. Just be very careful with the paint. So we're going to remove the M6 bolts on the side, and once we have those off, then we'll be able to mount the seat to our rail system. Now that we have our bolts off, I'm going to use the M5s. I'm going to loosen these seat strut clamps. I'm going to actually remove this whole section just for now, so that way we can look a little closer detail at the seat rail. We'll set that aside. Now on the brackets, there is one position for the front and there's two positions for the rear. We're going to want to use the lowermost position, the position furthest away from the seat for the back. That way we won't have any contact between the bracket and the tube, and we don't want to scratch the paint. So the first thing we're going to do is attach our bolts onto the front, and then we'll install the rear bolts, and remembering to have that mount be on the uppermost holes. Now you can use the lower holes. I would just be very careful that you don't scratch the paint when you tighten it down, because you really need to cinch those bolts nice and tight to prevent the seat from moving on the rail. Once we have our bolts in place, you can see here we've used the furthest most holes on the back and the regular holes on the front. Now with those loose, we'll be able to move our seat back and forth, wiggle it back and forth to find a perfect position for our distance from the pedals to the seat. It'll also help us dial in our seat angle. So now we make sure everything's in position and we can tighten these bolts down for a temporary tightness. Once the seat base is nice and secure, we're going to put our rear seat bracket back in, and then we'll be able to reattach the rear seat struts to the top of the seat. Now it's important to have those clamps loose so everything lines up. You can use the lower holes or the top holes. It's at your choice. It all depends on the angle you might want to get. Now the reason why we have those clamps loose is in case this does not line up. If something seems a little crooked, it's probably because the clamps are tight, because once these clamps are loose, the entire movement can slide back and forth and also side to side. Now note, if you want more seat recline, you'll want to shorten these tubes a little bit. That's always something you can customize to get more recline out of the seat. So here we have our thing. If we don't have it lined up, if those clamps are not loose, then the entire unit can be tilted off to the side, and then it won't line up with the rear seat bracket. So you'll want to make sure those clamps are a little loose so you can position it directly behind the seat. And once everything is in a good position, we will tighten everything down. And of course, once your bike is completely built, then you'll want to do a full adjustment for fit. All right, now we have our handlebar. Your T50 includes just a standard gull wing style handlebar, very popular. It can face forward or backward depending on how much hand reach you want or what kind of angle you want your hands to be. I'm going to go for a standard installation here, so we're just going to put it right in through there, center it, and then tighten the clamps with a 4mm Allen. Now the bar is sized for mountain gear, so that's important to know. It will take twist shifters, top bar shifters, or bar end shifters, which come on the complete T50, and that gives you a lot of options for your componentry. All right, then as of always, of course, our installation of the seat pad. So we have our Velcro strips, which we've stuck down there, and the Velcro on the back, and we will stick our seat pad to the seat. And that basically completes the assembly of our T50 frame set. Again, this is a perfect platform for a little cruiser. You can use
26-inch wheels, 406 wheels. It will fit even 650B wheels, 68 millimeter threaded bottom bracket shell, standard international style disc brakes. Everything on here is pretty straightforward. Build your dream cruise bike off of this great platform. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at support@cruzbike.com. And thank you so much for watching, and happy riding.